Welcome to the Really American Podcast. Well, welcome to another edition of the Really American Podcast. I am your host, Chip Franklin, with you as we try to go through what's going on in the world and make a little bit of sense out of it. Obviously, what you've been listening to in the last 48 hours is Trump's apparent admission that he's willing to be bribed and he's just an outright whore. He's going to take a $400 million jet from Qatar and he's going to put it in his library after it's all said and done. If you believe that, I have some real estate for you. But I think the thing that really worries me the most about this moving forward is the reactions. And they range from, Fox News trying to defend it and listening to, some of the people on but then there's some people there that are attacking him that are outside his normal circle of people, like Mark Levin or Ben Shapiro or Laura Loomer. So we'll get to all that in just a second as well. The tariffs, of course, are still floating out there. Anybody that thinks that's done is out of their mind. If there's still a 30% tariff, just look at it this way. If you were going to buy a $30,000 car, it's going to cost closer to $40,000 now. If you're going to buy $500 worth of parts, they're going to cost $1,500. So if you don't think it has an effect, it does. And we'll get to that as well. Mike Lee, the senator from Utah, who infamously was caught on tape saying that he wants to get rid of Social Security, is now wants to get rid of porn. Our next guest will have a great interest in that. I'll tell you why in a minute, and he'll come in with his sunglasses on. And as well, coming up also, Stephen Miller. Is he actually doing everything? And Pam Bondi is the propaganda Barbie that's out in front of us all. Joining us right now to answer some of these questions, it's a guy you probably know. He is a world famous journalist and generally a pain in the ass to the Trump administration, as you've seen over the years. And probably most famously, Brian Karam was the one that called Trump out on whether or not he'd leave office gracefully and lawfully. And as we saw on January 6th in 2021, that didn't happen. Brian, good to see you. You look great, my friend.
Yeah. Good to see you, Chip. How you doing?
I'm good. Let me just off the top here. You've been in journalism. We've known each other 30 plus years. What do you make of everybody leaving? The latest that David Muir is going to be splitting. Looks like that Lester Holt's stepping down. Now, granted, those are health issues on Lester Holt's part, but Lawrence O'Donnell was talking about MSNBC's move, the journalists that they've shoved aside. I guess if I was that age and, I had to look forward to this shit for the next, 4 years, I might quit too. But how concerned are you?
Well, I've been concerned since day one. I figure there is very little real journalism left, and it's hard to find it on any of the networks, any of the.
You watch. I mean, that's one of the things about when they were threatening, when Trump was threatening and still is threatening to sue CBS and shut down 60 Minutes. Right? I thought to myself, who watches that anymore? I mean, I know my kids don't. And kids don't.
Yeah, a lot of kids don't, but that means they're less informed. But the bigger problem is
they can get it from other places, and it's not all bad.
Well, no, but it's not necessarily vetted factual information. There's a lot of opinions out there, and getting vetted factual information, professional journalism is on the wane. That's because you have smaller staffs, you have a lot of people doing the jobs that, one person's doing the job of 2 or 3 or 4 as they used to.
And let's talk about that real quick. When you say that, because if you're doing a story and you have to fact check stuff, that takes you away from your story. Yeah. If you have a staff of people, that's their job. They're fact checkers. They're checking facts along the way while you're putting a story together.
There's a lot of places where it's hurt. It's hurt with support staff. It's hurt with, think of it, journalism is a cooperative effort. It isn't just one person. One person cannot do it. The biggest fault that I find with the current environment is the fact there are not just fact checkers, but editors. An editor is someone who will stand behind you and go, "Where'd you get that quote? How do you spell that?"
Yeah. You hate editors. You hate editors because they make you a better writer.
But you have to have them.
Right.
And so we're not getting them. So the biggest problem I find, first of all, with CBS, that it's not that people are not going to CBS anymore. It's that Donald Trump used what's called a strategic lawsuit against public participation, a SLAPP lawsuit. He doesn't anticipate winning this. He doesn't want to win it. He wants to threaten CBS because they have other business with the administration and it will cost them money. So they bow. And so that's the problem. The fact is that companies are bowing to him because they do not want to be involved in spending the extra money that it takes to fight an obvious bullshit lawsuit.
We saw this with the AP being pushed out of the White House and not being able to sit in on these briefings.
In the pool.
Yeah, in the pool, excuse me. And you pushed that envelope a few times. You're not in the pool right now. This is you talking to Huckabee Sanders, and in this, I love this famous exchange because you're talking like a reporter, but also like a human being.
Actually do something about it.
Jill, don't you have any empathy?
Jill, go ahead.
Come on, Sarah, you're a parent. Don't you have any empathy for what these people are going through? They have less than
Brian,
you do.
guys,
Sarah, come on,
settle down.
Seriously.
I'm trying to be serious, but I'm not going to have you yell out of turn. Jill, please
It's
call.
a law, and these people have nothing.
Hey, Brian, I know you want to get some more TV time, but that's not what this is about. If I want to recognize you, go ahead, Jill.
Honestly, answer the question. It's a serious question. These people have nothing. They come to the border with nothing, and you throw children in cages. You're a parent. You're a parent of young children. Don't you have any empathy for what they go through?
Jill, go ahead.
Two questions for you. Firstly, is the president really believe that Crimea is...
Okay, now that is not your standard journalistic approach. But when I think of you, I think of you like I think that this is necessary. You're not going to see that in the pool right now, that's for sure.
No. Well, it's necessary to get an answer. It's a simple question. Do you have any empathy for what these people are going through? And you ask that question because it's a necessary question to ask of another human being. The fact of the matter is, if you're putting people in cages and you're separating children and families, do you have any empathy for that? Which boils down to the essence of that is the policy that this president enacted. Do you not understand what it is you're doing? And the fact of the matter is, she couldn't answer it then. They don't want to answer it now.
No, they don't. And I think that on some of the issues, especially, well, it's interesting. You are that was what, 6-7 years ago? How long ago was that?
Yeah, that was that'd have to be within the first 6 or 8 months of the first maybe 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. So when I think of that, I think of there's a series of ways you can go. You can obfuscate, which she was doing. She wouldn't answer the question, right? And that was the old, the Rex Tillersons, the John Kellys, the Millie Mattis group, that was like everybody when he came in 2016, everybody thought he's going to put some normal people around him. And he did, but they could only take it for so long, right? I mean, Tillerson's on record as calling him a effing idiot, and I think that when you look at that and you ask yourself,
right.
Well, I mean, obviously everybody knows this now, but I think the thing that, that James Carville is in the news right now saying that we should put our teeth into this jet and hold on to it for 3 years because he's not going to give it up. And it's something that, there's so many things that, from the Bannon playbook, and let's just keep throwing shit at them and they'll forget about the first shit that we want them to forget about, But when I think of like that infamous clip now that I was just trying to pull it up here, but I'll just get to it anyway. If I find it, we can use it, of Tom Homan saying, when asked by 60 Minutes, what do you do about these kids when you're deporting their parents? And he goes, we can deport the whole family. And he said it with such aplomb, like it was like, of course we'll just, and the idea that, I say this all the time and it takes a while, but the reason so many Central Americans and Mexicans are in our country, the reason is real simple. It's because we installed dictatorships and supported dictators in Central America for years. And that created gangs and lawlessness that these people wanted to escape. And they looked to the United States, as many as in the past.
We created the situation. You're absolutely right. And Smedley Butler, the second highest decorated Marine Corps member ever, behind, I forget who else, Chesty Puller. Anyway, the second highest ranked and second most decorated Marine Corps member ever, wrote a book called War is a Racket. And that was 100 years ago. And he said he was tired of being a professional soldier, going down to Central and South America, acting as a hired thug for the American government, not just the government, but American businesses, Dole Pineapple, and a bunch of other places. He pointed out a lot of other businesses. We created the entire situation in Central and South America. And so after we've created the despondency and these people look to us to come to the country for salvation, we then turn them around. We created the gangs, we created the lawlessness, we create the absolute pitiful conditions in which many of these people live. Yeah,
actually, if you go back and look, Reagan actually facilitated the drug cartel in order to get guns to the Middle East. That was insane.
It's 100 years of doing it. 100, and you can't sit there. It's like now Donald Trump is in the Middle East, right? And whoever gets the most toys wins. Donnie, I get it, but he's sitting there. He says, "I'm not actually after I'm not just going to beat up on the Iranians. There are people that have tried to destroy the Middle East and hegemony and and all these horrible things that have been done by multinational interests." Donnie, that was us. 1953, the Iranian coup. They had a democracy.
Right.
The CIA destroyed that democracy.
Installed the Shah.
And installed the Shah. We created that problem. Most of the problems that we face are of our own making.
Well, it's funny too. I think of 1979 as the first brick in the wall falling out, where when they ignored the U.S. Embassy and these kids jumped over. I say kids. Yeah. Some were bad, some were good, some were fighting for their country. It was difficult. But when these students held the hostages for 444 days, it showed. I think I think it ushered in Reagan simply because of the same reason that Trump came in. They thought this plain speaking sort of tough guy who's talking tough about the Soviet Union and others, they could be able to handle them. Well, no, they couldn't. We have learned. I mean, you just look what happened after the. I don't want to go down this road. But
yeah.
After the Afghan war, we could have gone in and done what we did in the Marshall Doctrine in Germany. We could have helped them, but we didn't. And we created, at the end of that Afghan war, did you know over 50% of the population was under 14?
Yeah. Well, look, the problem we have is when we do good, we don't realize we do good and we screw it up.
Yeah.
And then, so at the end of the Afghan war, you have that problem, but we help create that.
Well, we're selling these jets to the Saudis, who are bombing Yemen and killing, during a civil war and a drought. And the bombs say "Made in USA." They know it if they don't literally say it, but they know where these weapons are coming from. This is, look,
the only people who don't, the people in the United States, we're ignorant of what we do.
I totally agree. But the thing is that you could just tell them, how bad is Saudi Arabia? It's so bad that Osama bin Laden left them. When Osama bin Laden calls you out, you're bad. Okay.
Well, yeah. And here's the problem with what really disturbs me about Donnie's trip in the last few days, not just the, whoever dies with the most toys wins. It's the fact that he went to MBS. They do this together, and he goes, I really like this guy. I can, this is a handsome man, smart too. I love him. I'll do anything for him. Well, guess what he did? He killed Jamal Khashoggi. That our own CIA proved it. There are documentaries about it. There's no doubt that he was behind the killing of this guy.
And for the people who don't, let me back that up a little bit.
They drawled him, they quartered him, and they burned him. And Donald Trump embraces him.
Khashoggi was a Washington Post reporter. Yeah. His children are U.S. citizens, right?
Yes.
He was, and he was over there, obviously looking at the Saudi government and what they don't do for their own people and what they propagate.
He was a dissident, yes, and who wrote and he said that the royal family is corrupt. He ran media in that country. He had to flee that country because of threats against him. And he pointed out the problems of the Saudi family, including MBS. And guess what he wanted? Democratization. Guess what we claim we want? A democracy. Guess what we don't have? A democracy.
Right. Let me ask. So the reporters, and this is your bailiwick, the reporters that were pushing Trump on the plane in the early part. Now everybody is. I talked about this in the setup that Laura Loomer obviously is really. I love it. Nice. She had that tweet out where she was saying she'd take a bullet for him. And then Mark Levin wrote ditto. And I'm like, well, look, if enough of you want to get together in front of guns, that's fine by me. What we have right now, though, is obvious grift. And when the question was asked by an ABC reporter and the response, it showed you just what Trump wants and what he's used to getting. And right now, the pushback on this plane is big. And you got people like Ted Cruz and Rand Paul going on television saying it shouldn't have happened.
Mr. President, what do you say to people who view that luxury jet as a personal gift to you? Why not leave it behind?
You're ABC fake news, right?
Why not?
It's only ABC. Well, a few of you would. Let me tell you, you should be embarrassed asking that question. They're giving us a free jet. I could say, no, don't give us. I want to pay you $1 billion or 400 million or whatever it is. Or I could say, thank you very much. You know, there was an old golfer named Sam Snead. Did you ever hear of him? He won 82 tournaments. He was a great golfer. And he had a motto: when they give you a putt, you say, thank you very much. You pick up your ball and you walk to the next hole. A lot of people are stupid. They say, no, I insist on putting it. Then they putt it and they miss it. And their partner gets angry at them. You know what?
You know, as a golfer right there, that says everything you need to know about the guy. That he can't finish the deal, and he will cheat in front of anyone and pretend that it's okay. The idea, nobody just picks up their ball, Don. Nobody just picks it up. Match play, yes, but.
And Donnie, if you think that it's being stupid to ask that question, I think it's being stupid to pick up the fucking putt. Excuse my foul language. But the fact of the matter is that Donald Trump is a criminal, a convicted criminal. And he was grifting right there. And by simply insulting the reporter for asking the very obvious question about this airplane. And let me remind everyone what's in let's take a look at what's in store. He accepts the airplane. Now, according to the DOD, it's going to take upwards of $1 billion to retrofit this thing to make it effective as Air Force One. There's no way that they can comb every bit of it and find every bug that they put in it, if there is a bug. It will take more than 4 years to retrofit this. Donald Trump will be out of office, supposedly, or dead, or in jail. And Donald Trump will never use this as Air Force One. The part of the deal is he gets to keep it and put it at his presidential library.
Which means he uses it whenever he wants to do something he considers an official duty. Yeah.
Yes, and he will have that airplane. So guess what, folks? It isn't a putt that you get to pick up. It's a putt that you pick up and you put it in your pants and it explodes. Donald Trump is a liar, a grifter, a cheat, a criminal, and the chickens. I agree with, as you said earlier, James Carville. This is one issue that you should not let go because everyone gets it. And Donald Trump insulting the press, when he starts insulting you, you know you're on to the right question. That's when you know you're hitting pay dirt. Right. When Donald Trump gets PO'd at you, you know that you're going in the right direction. Every other reporter should have piled on. That's where we have failed as a press to follow up on these questions, because when he acts like that, people cower and get bullied. I refuse to do it, which is why I'm not in the pool, because I refuse to as you saw in the clip earlier, I ain't taking it from Sarah Sanders, and I sure as hell ain't taking it from Donald Trump.
Do you ever get any pushback from editors or publishers about, cool it a little bit?
I've always gotten, I don't give a shit. That's the thing is, at the end of the day, my argument is, you want the story or not? This is what it takes. If you don't want the story, don't put me there. Otherwise, I'm there, shut up, and I'll do my job. Okay.
There's something I didn't mention this in the setup, but I wanted to ask you before I forget. Judges right now, we've heard with Bondi and others speak to it like this.
He's in a prison now in El Salvador. He was sent there. You insist, the president, everybody in the administration insists that he's MS-13. It appears that there's not going to be any sort of trial. He's not going to come back. DHS said he would be arrested and redeported if he comes back. Why not show the American people the evidence that he's MS-13 so they can make an informed decision? And that goes the same with this Henry Josue Santos, who was picked up in Virginia, who is now presumably going to be deported as well. Why not show the public the evidence?
Well, he is an illegal alien who has been living illegally in our country from El Salvador. ICE testified, an immigration judge ruled he was a member of MS-13, an appellate judge ruled he was a member of MS-13.
Appropriately, but what I will tell you is this judge has no right to ask those questions. You have.
So this is where we get in. Yeah, and this is where we start looking at the Wisconsin judge. I think her name was Hogan. I'm going to.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, she's been arrested and now is facing charges for, in essence, laying the groundwork for immigrants to avoid ICE. And that's all she did. I mean, in my opinion, but we'll get to. But there's something that Bondi and Miller and Bannon and nobody in the close circle, but has brought up the idea of possibly arresting federal judges. Now, it's against the Constitution. You cannot arrest a federal judge. You can indict them, or you actually, and it's called an impeachment process in the House of Representatives, and they convict them in the U.S. Senate. You need 67 votes. It's difficult, right? They have lifetime appointments.
You're talking about arresting them for doing their
for anything. You can't if they get in a car accident and kill somebody, right? Well, the state can charge them.
Yes, they can be indicted, charged, and arrested then. But for what she did, what you're talking about is because it's interpreted as being part of her job. You can't just.
She's a county judge. She was a county judge.
Yeah,
I'm talking about federal judges. You cannot arrest.
Right.
Just can't go in and arrest them. So this is our next step is that, and this is what I want to ask you about this. So just what do we do to protect these judges? And can the states themselves provide protection outside their homes? I mean, and because if the federal government's not going to do it, I don't see Trump putting the National Guard out to protect federal judges he disagrees with.
Well, depends on which state and depends on the legislation in the state. But overall umbrella, the only thing that you can really do, and I'm not the best legal expert in the world, but I know this much: you're going to have to get rid of the guy who's sitting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
That's not going to happen. I mean, you're not going to get.
So there really is. So the bottom line is, you're going to have to depend on your local and state legislators, and if they bow to Trump, you're screwed. So you're going to have to rely on them to abide by state law.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that, we've been talking about now for 10 years is, when will these Republican senators that support him, what is the line that Trump has to cross?
Money.
No. I mean, for example, there are people like Rubio and Rand Paul and others, and not Rubio's right now because he's in the camp and he's a cuckold. But when you look at the rest of them, I think the tariff thing caused him to step back and go, holy crap, he has no idea what he's doing. He doesn't understand macroeconomics. It's pretty obvious. And even just trying to explain what a tariff was embarrassing.
And he still doesn't know, but that's another story.
Okay. But and this jet is just so over the top. It's caused, again, it's not the line yet. Well, it's not the line that's going to cause them 67 senators to convict him, because they'll be able to get the 220 votes in the House.
The line is money. At the end of the day, if there are, it boils down to this: the biggest staff that any congressman or senator has is their communication staff that fields customer complaint, fields constituent complaints. Right. And so if they start to see in their internal polling, and from the phone calls and from the letters and from the actions, and by the way, the town halls that they won't do anymore, if they see pushback from constituents and they start to feel like they are going to be threatened with losing their job, because let's face it, most of them couldn't get a job anywhere else. Marjorie Taylor Greene couldn't get a job as a cocktail waitress.
Right.
So I'm sorry, that's where it's got to be. They've got to feel the pressure on themselves. It's all about self-survival. That boils down to money. You're going to have to make and by God, I tell everyone, if you have a complaint and of your congressman, first know who your congressman and your senators are, and then do not hesitate to complain to them, because at the end of the day, they do listen to that. They don't want to be primaried from the right. They don't want to be they want to keep their job. And if you let them know that they're in danger of losing that job, they will move. They'll magically find an ethical way of doing it. I was with Donald Trump that this plane is too much. That's, or whatever it is.
Well, I think about, what's going to happen, what most probably will happen, and also worst case scenarios. And obviously the worst case scenarios is Insurrection Act, and he doesn't allow the 2026 primaries. I mean, off-year elections. And if that happens, what happens next?
Well, that would be the type of, that would be a huge, and look, I don't put anything past Donald Trump. I could see him declaring martial law, saying a national security issue, martial law, no election. Honest to God. Right. Whether he'll do that or not.
But that would be the line. That would be the line, right? I mean, that's when they would.
Well, that is a concrete line there, because there are Republicans who don't like that idea.
Well, I can actually pick right now. Basically what you need is about 6 or 7 Republicans in the Senate to say yes, we will join. Oh no, you need more than that. You need 12.
Yes, you do. 12.
To get to the 67 votes to remove him. And I try to think to myself, okay, but if he had martial law declared, would he even allow them to convict and remove him from office? I mean, this is all.
That's the whole thing. He probably would not. And then you're talking about real violence in the U.S. Then.
Yeah. Well, listen to this. This is Miller talking about what he wants to do and how he wants to carve the minds of young people. And this shit here sounds just like something Goebbels would have said. Listen.
Children will be taught to love America. Children will be taught to be patriots. Children will be taught civic values for schools that want federal taxpayer funding. So as we close the Department of Education and we provide funding to states, we are going to make sure that these funds are not being used to promote communist ideology. For any nation to be successful, it cannot teach its children to hate themselves and to hate their country.
God, does he not sound like Nazi Germany?
Yeah, well, all right. First of all, if you actually taught civic values, he wouldn't be in office. But we don't teach civic values.
Yeah, right,
that's. But here's something you really should know, and this is to the crux of the matter. I have a very good source inside the White House, inside the Donald Trump administration, who tells me that there are people who are basically afraid to push back against Donald Trump, and that they do not agree with everything that he does. But more importantly, that the person who's really pulling the strings is Stephen Miller. Donald Trump is susceptible to listening to whoever the last person is who speaks into his ear. He's not that bright. The one that he trusts, the one that usually gets him the last word. And by the way, a guy who has walk-in privileges to the Oval Office. In other words, he doesn't have to have an appointment. He doesn't have to be a part of the meeting. If he wants to, he can walk in. That's Stephen Miller. Miller admitted as much to a group of reporters that he can walk in whenever he wants. So he sits and he waits, and he's usually, I'm told, the one who speaks last, and Donald Trump listens to him. And
he didn't have to go through the chief of staff. He didn't have to do any of that. He just goes. No?
He can just do whatever he wants. And to that point, when Donald Trump recently had a meeting in the Oval Office, and he was confronted with the fact that he had lost a case in the Supreme Court 9-0, he turned. Now, we all know Donald Trump doesn't read the findings of the Supreme Court. He turned to Stephen Miller. He says, "Hey, we won that one, didn't we?" And Miller goes, "Absolutely, we won that 9-0. No one, not one reporter, no one in that room pointed to Donald Trump and said, "Sir, that man is lying to you." The guy you have to be afraid of, the guy who's actually steering the rudderless ship of state right now, is Stephen Miller. It's not Elon Musk. It's not the vice president. It's not the president. It's that person that you saw right there behind the podium.
I mean, there's so much that's off the rails right now that it's not a car with one tire, in the dirt. It's all 4 tires. And I wondered to myself, how I could, like what Carville said that this morning, actually, that we should put our teeth into the Qatar. By the way, when did it stop being Qatar and go back to Qatar? I thought it was Qatar. Anyway, but that we should put our teeth into that and fight all the way through. And I really believe that. And when I listen to people like Ben Shapiro, who, Ben, right? I mean, from way back. Yeah. I mean, you and I both knew a lot of these guys. Like I used to know Tucker Carlson, all these when they were kids. I'm not that. I'm older than them by 20 years probably, but I knew them when they were. I was in. I was like 40 or late 30s, and they were just trying to get their feet wet. Howard Mortman, Howard from C-SPAN, right? All these guys, old friends of mine, and so I knew them when I was in DC, and I think that what's happened since then is they got drunk on this power, And I really do believe that they were given, I mean, like somebody like Tucker Carlson was given this broad access to the right because he was, this handsome young man, the bow tie.
The bow tie.
Yeah. And it fit right in. And people like George Will, real conservatives, who you and I will disagree with on many issues, but Will is he's a straight shooter. He's not going to BS you. He's going to tell you, your idea. I met him when I was about 19, and I went up to him because it was an event. He has a Down syndrome kid, and I had a friend that had one, and we were in an event, and I said, I couldn't disagree with you more. And he goes, oh, I bet you could if you tried. he had a sense of humor at the time to this kid that was walking up to him and saying that, right? And so I look at that and I think to myself, in the conservative Republican Party, and this includes the decent evangelicals, not the Joel Osteens, but the good people, right? And I'm an atheist, but I know that some of these people really want to do good, and we may disagree on what happens when we die, but here we're all on the same page. And I know that there has to be discussions going across the country, but this is the time to stop it now, and not in 2026. If he does try to stop these, or just works with some of the key states, that he wants to get. I mean, he can do it in a different way than just shutting down the elections. He can go to states like Ohio or Kansas, where there is some blue movement, or even Texas. Right?
Or voter suppression. You'll have the appearance of what they're trying to do. I don't think that they'll stop the 2026 elections, but if you look at what he's trying to do for voter suppression, in order to keep people from voting who would vote against him, in other words, if you're not white, and if you can't get to the polls, except between 9 and 5, and working people can't. I mean, he's trying to limit the time that you can vote, trying to make sure it's in person, would love to get rid of, computerized voting and just have ballots. And by the way, this is a poll tax. The supposition that you would have to have, right, your passport in order to vote, to prove that you're an American citizen, which is a proposal that they've endorsed. It takes $130 to get a passport. Not everyone has one. This is a poll tax. This is a poll tax. And
by the way, and the Fifth Amendment specifically says you do not have to prove that you did not break the law. So when I go to vote and you tell me I have to show ID, you are accusing me of committing a crime. Under the Fifth Amendment, it's upon you to show that I'm not allowed to vote. And when I come up there, and if you can't, when I go to vote, then you have to allow me to vote. And by the way, and you know this as well as I do, if you go over the records from the last 40 years, and you take, and even from red states to California, and you go and you look for it, there has never been an election on a federal level, and very, very few on top state levels, and even at the lowest dog catcher level, where you saw people come in and vote. When Trump lost in 2016 and said that 3 million illegals voted, and that's why he lost, and people just said, okay, when they just went with it like that, you realize this was going to be a long road, that there were a lot of intellectually lazy people, and a media that was not strung together tight enough to call them on it.
Well, let's remember what George Carlin said. Remember how stupid the average person is, and realize half of them are stupider than that.
Yeah, well, part of us, we kind of have to stop doing that, and I do it every day with videos on Really American, and I attack the people like, Boebert or Green, or, and then on another level,
she's too stupid to insult. She literally is too stupid.
Really is. She's not.
My greatest story about Marjorie Taylor Greene is I was in one of those trams, going from the Capitol to the office buildings. And I was sitting there and I was thumbing through. I wasn't paying any attention. I was the only one sitting in that car. And as I'm sitting there, two people walked past me. And I ignored them. I was busy in my phone. Then I got a tap on my shoulder, and I turned over and looked, and it was Marjorie Taylor Greene's assistant. And she said, "The Congresswoman will not speak to you." And I go, "Who?" And I looked up, and it was Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I said, "Well, tell her she's too stupid to ask a question about. I don't give a shit what she thinks." And she goes, "You can't say that about her." I go, "Everyone says that about her."
Well, my greatest claim to fame is that I started calling her Dairy Queen about the year after she got elected, and Cracker Barrel and Waffle House, and Swalwell calls her that now. Calls her Dairy Queen. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, but some of the stuff she does is reflective, though, of the base, right?
Yep. Anybody else?
Should the defense secretary?
What country are you? Wait, what country are you
From the UK?
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go?
Wow. So that's what, that's part of what's the
I love how you had that queued up, ready to go. All I had to say was Marjorie Taylor Greene go, wait a minute, I got 6 of them. Boom, 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 boom.
Well, part of this whole this whole place where we are right now is it's hard for a lot of people to wrap their heads around. I mean, and we know this. You hear people all the time. They come up to you, and I know they do, family, friends, and they go, "What's going to happen?" And
yeah, and it's never good. They never go, "Hey, it looks great. What's going to happen?" It's always like, "Shit, should I move to Canada?"
By the way, you can't. If you're an American, you cannot buy property in Canada. And
yeah, there you go.
That way for a few years. New Zealand wants everybody there. They want rich Americans to come there. I do think though,
their coastlines are shrinking. So as the water rises. So
before we get to our porn story, I want to get to this and looking ahead to 2028. When I hear Harris possibly running again, or AOC, or another Bernie run, I'm like, God damn it, how long is it going to take you guys to figure that what you think is right and what will actually win are two different things? And you can win with people like Pritzker or Shapiro or Bashar. There are people out there that are good, and they have progressive tendencies. And unlike the breaking story with Biden right now, is that they're young enough that we can they can be there for a generation. I wonder as we move forward if people like AOC and others in that movement are beginning to understand the pragmatics involved here and the importance of that.
I wish, but like I said, the article I wrote last week, I have an insider in the Trump White House who said, look, we very much would like to push back against Donald Trump. However, if we come out, we risk being prosecuted by Trump. And by the way, we're scared that the Democrats will not accept us. So so they'll have no place to go. They feel like they're between a rock and a hard place. They're not necessarily, blaming Democrats, but they at least want to hold on to the Constitution. The Democrats should embrace those people. But instead, when I posted this online, you would not believe the number of people, Democrats, who said, screw them. I don't care. I want AOC. And I'm going, you don't get it. You just don't get it. And that's the reason why you continue to lose. We have two political parties in this country. One has no heart. One has no head. Guess which is which?
Well, all right. So, but for example, I don't know if they've even done this yet. Have they fired David Hogg? They were talking about firing him in the DNC.
I don't know. And that's another bunch of BS.
By the way, he's the kid from the Parkland shooting that has become an advocate for gun control and gun legislation across the country. And he was on Bill Maher. I don't know if you saw him a couple nights ago. Bright kid.
Well, I don't watch Bill Maher anymore because he's a moron, but I'll take your word for that.
Well, I watch it kind of because it's my job, and you and I both.
I can't watch him anymore. After he came back from the Donald Trump trip, he was me. Oh, I got to go to the White House. Me. Oh, he was nice to me. Ooh, and I'm just going. You just. 5 minutes after that aired, I got a call from a Trumper who said, see, I told you Donald Trump is great. And I'm going, that's all you got played, Bill Maher, and you're an idiot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I think that Maher is
I'll finish.
He's going to quit doing stand-up. I think he's going to try to do more politics and get into it. But he's a comedian, and he does a show with people that have provocative conversations. And I enjoy. I tune in and I listen to the opening interview, and then I'll persevere through some of his stuff. But I don't mean to trash Maher. I've known him like you. I've known him for more than 40 years. But he is out there, and people do, we talked about this in the beginning, like with journalism. I mean, it's a new world, and we do need people that will call bullshit when they see it. We also need people who can.
I'm calling bullshit on Bill Maher.
Well, for example, like tariffs, right? There's these kids that are on the street. There's one group called the Good Liars, the Jordan Kleppers, and they ask people about tariffs. Who pays a tariff? And people really believe that the other country does because Trump says it. But there's some people out there explain it really well. They say, when this stuff comes over here, in order to sell it here, they have to give up money, and they know that in advance. So the price has to go up to cover the money they have to give. You pay the tariff, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And when they try to explain this to people and they walk down, I think it's actually resonating. I mentioned Ben Shapiro. I just want to play this short little clip. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but Shapiro, upon hearing about the $400 million plane from Qatar, like others were like, well, number one, Qatar now funds the group that used to be Al Qaeda, and Nasser, I think is their name. They put money into building this jihadist state. They support terrorism. They've given planes to other people like Erdogan and others, and so it's because he was very critical of them, and then they gave him a plane to shut him up, and he did. He shut up. A $500 million plane. So. They have obviously incredible reserves.
Didn't they realize that the
what they are?
They're like, is cheaper? For the love of God, Elon Musk bought him for $250 million. You didn't have to spend that much, folks.
Well, and Musk, of course, is what's killing him with his Tesla stock, and he might be actually kicked out of that role as a CEO. Is he's making it up with SpaceX and other investments from the federal government. But I guess the thing I want to go back to is when I look at this and I think to myself, the pushback, and this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for whatever left of the Kinzinger Cheney Republican Party. I know they're out there, and when I hear somebody like Ben Shapiro, who I disagree with on probably
everything.
On everything, but you can sit down and talk to him, and he will not. He talks fast and he's odd. And if you don't know him, this is what he always talks. Listen to this.
The Trump administration is now preparing to accept a super luxury Boeing 747-8 jumbo jet from the royal family of Qatar. It is a $400 million gift available for use by President Trump as new Air Force One until shortly before he leaves office, at which time, according to the deal, the plane doesn't stay with the United States government. It then moves to the Trump Presidential Library Foundation, taking sacks of goodies from people who support Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood, Al Jazeera, all the rest. That's not America first. Please define America first in a way that says you should take sacks of cash from the Qatari royals who are behind Al Jazeera. It just isn't America first in any conceivable way. So back to the original question. Is this good for President Trump? Is it good for his agenda? Is it good for draining the swamp and getting things done? The answer is no, it isn't.
Yeah. Okay. So
he's got good hair paste.
Well, he had a yarmulke on, I think, on the back of his head. Anyway, but I think of this right now, and I look at what Shapiro and again Laura Loomer and the people that are close to him, Mark Levin, and Cruz and Rand Paul, not to mention the Susan Collins and Murkowski and Tillis and. There's a lot of Republicans in both the Senate and the House that are worried. And I think they're worried that some of their districts are beginning to show a renaissance of blue. Let's remember, 97 million eligible voters did not vote. And the polls seem to indicate as high as 90% of those oppose Trump. That should be pretty easy work for the Democrats. They need to put somebody out front. You see what Newsom's talking. I mean, Newsom's not the guy, in my opinion, but Newsom's talking about
he's trying to be the
transgender sports. He's talking about, he brought in Charlie Kirk, who some of my sons hate with a passion. And I know you know Kirk. I know Kirk from way back, and he's a kid, I think when I look at him, and I have a clip. I'm not going to play it, but of him saying the Civil Rights Act was one of the worst things for America. And when young people say shit like that, I'm like, you're not thinking this through, man. I know you're not a bigot and a racist. I don't believe he is. I just think that they get into this mindset. Remember when we heard
points? They are emotional talking points.
Who was the person that said that was it Jesse Waters or somebody that said that slavery was actually good in some way?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So when I hear that, my first thought to them is, why would you say such a thing like that? That doesn't help either side. The people that are bigots are going to look at you as some sort of concession, and the people on the left are going to go, "What are you trying to do here?" This is when I look at it's obvious what Trump's doing with Miller. And and who's the guy you almost got in a fight with on the White House lawn? Gorka, what's his name?
The fish oil sales.
Yeah,
that guy.
You almost got to fight. Everybody that watches you goes, not surprised at all. I say that somebody wanted to beat you up on the White House lawn. But
all I did was ask him to go outside. I'm not going to get in a fight on the White House lawn.
Right.
Let's take it outside.
But I do believe we've reached a point now where that it's obviously when Trump is incorrectable. That's not the word, but you know what I mean. He's there's nothing that's going to fix him. The people that are surround him, we realize, are just as bad. And they're smarter.
They're
so
worse.
That's worse. Right.
Because
they know better. They know better. They're not
he is a means to an end for them. Yeah. Donald Trump isn't the problem. It's that when Donald Trump got into office, he couldn't find anybody competent and cogent and ethical to hire. So he hires all the people who have longed for a path to a voice for many years, and their voice is as disparate as they are. And so at the end of the day, you've got the Janine Perros, you've got the Gorkas, you've got Stephen Miller. And that's the problem. They have their own agenda, and they are using Trump to enact that agenda. And folks, it isn't about 2020, Project 2025. That's part of the problem. The real problem is that there are people far worse in that administration, far worse.
All right, so wrapping it up here again, we're talking to Brian Karam, reporter. You can find his podcasts on everywhere. And what's the one you want people to find the most?
Well, let's see. The book is Free the Press. You can find me on Substack at Brian Karam on Substack, and it's Reporter's Notebook. I'm in Salon once a week with a column, and now entering our 7th year, Just Ask the Question is the podcast.
There you go. And it's great stuff. Good, really great people. Not as good as this podcast, but it's getting
No, nothing is as good as this podcast. Come on. This is the best.
Utah Senator Mike Lee has introduced a bill to make virtually all porn a federal crime. Now, I don't know anything about Mike Lee personally, but whenever I hear somebody do that, I want to go in their basement and see what they have hidden there, because
I don't.
Well, no, I mean, you know what I mean.
Those cages are all stuck together. I'm just saying.
No, I'm thinking like there's cages full of whatever. But whenever
I mean the gimp in leather.
He's calling it the Interstate Obscenity Definition Act, and he wants to establish a definition of obscenity in order to empower law enforcement to, quote, identify and prevent obscenity from being transmitted across state lines. Well, of course, obviously, social media has lost their mind. And I have a bunch here. Like, if this goes through, Ted Cruz isn't going to prison. It's funny, and everybody's paging Ted Cruz because apparently he posted a photo. I should have it, and I don't. And I apologize. Of a woman, and just barely could see her breast. You couldn't see her nipple, but it was like, and everybody, jumped right on that. Look, the deal is here, and I think the thing that we all have to understand is that when they get a little momentum, they just throw stuff against the wall, and that means the MAGA, and of course, we all know this, that MAGA looks at as much porn as you and I do, and everybody else out there, whatever you want to define whatever your thing is. But Potter Stewart, of course, famously said, I can't define it, but I know when I see it. And I think that's kind of where we will be. But, I do believe, though, that this, as Hawley and others said, they want Christian nationalism. They literally want to abolish that part of the First Amendment and create a theocracy in this country. And because it works well, it does. When you control people's minds about the afterlife and all, and what they have to do, you can really control them. And they know this. They don't care about a God or anything like that, but they see the power inside this. And this is part of what Mike Lee's trying to do.
Yeah, it's all about. Well, as the former senior White House correspondent for Playboy magazine.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah.
Let me just say that any moron who wants to try and legislate what pornography is better take a look at Potter Stewart, because the fact of the matter is one man's porn is another man's family portrait. So you can't really define it. And the idea, like you said, it's just trying to throw shit up on the wall and see what sticks. And this won't stick, even among the MAGA members who, like you say, probably secretly look. And I'll be honest with you. I have been to Democratic and Republican national conventions over the last 40 years, several of them. And the Democrats are always talking about inclusion, and everyone thinks that they are the real perverts. And I would go back to 1996 when I was in Chicago for the Democratic National Convention, and they're all, so it's Al Gore, and he's up there singing "Do the Macarena," and everybody's going nuts because the whole 30,000 people in this, in Chicago are doing the Macarena, and they're talking about, and the whole thing with Clinton and, the stained dress, and they're a bunch of perverts. And then I think it was in San Diego that year that I went for the Republican National Convention. And I mean, they had glory holes in the bathroom. So I'm telling you, the people who get their freak on are the Republicans. And it's always after they preach about what decadent people the Democrats are, the decadent Democrats come out and scream about everybody should have what they want. And then they go home and fall
Remember
asleep
that Eastern
and don't even
Shore
party.
You remember that Eastern Shore Congressman Bauman? Remember that guy?
Yes.
That was, he was a hardcore evangelical guy, and you found out he was trolling for boys in Southeast Washington, D.C. But look, both sides do it. You got on the other side, you got Anthony Weiner, appropriately named, taking selfies.
Yes, there's a joke just waiting to be made.
Yeah. Anyway, so we'll keep in touch with you, Brian Karam. Thank you so much for being on the Really American podcast, my friend, and please stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks, buddy. Again, that is Brian Karam. You can find out more. Just Ask the Question is his podcast. On this show, coming up next week, we are going to have Max Brooks. He is the son of Mel Brooks, and he is a writer. He wrote this book, World War Z. The movie was made with Brad Pitt. But what's really a part of that is the idea of what happens when the shit hits the fan, when you reach a dystopian moment in American culture. So we'll talk a little bit about that and how that book has been prophetic and is now prophetic. He also wrote a book last year about it's a short story, only 50 pages, but it's about what would happen if China and the United States actually went to war. So we'll talk a lot about that with him. Also, a guy named Rich Logus, who started a thing called Leaving MAGA. He was a former member of MAGA. He'll be joining us on that segment as well. So we'll talk all about that. Anyway, go to Really American, check out our podcasts there, and also check out our videos. We have a lot there for you, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for the Really American podcast. I'm Chip Franklin.